Welcome everyone to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell. Today I'd like to share with you a special conversation with Catherine Skye Knott, who is an international holistic journalist, columnist, and broadcaster. With over 20 years writing and exploring holistic approaches and our relationship with nature, Catherine can be found in radio, print, magazine, and digital media. She currently writes for Advocate Media under the column of Keeping It Holistic. And this is where we first met when she reached out to talk about Tai Chi and the power of the movement that I've enjoyed as an instructor and as a participant. You can find this on Spotify with her podcast, Nature and Beyond, Season 3, Episode 2. It's called Tai Chi, the Intention of Movement. And of course, there are many wonderful conversations also there about holistic techniques and opportunities that you can check out. If you visit naturetherapiesancounseling.wordpress.com, you can find all of the pieces that Catherine has extended from there. She's dove into different kinds of therapies and conversations that create different topics about wellness and self-empowerment. Writing also for multidimensional newsletters, there's an opportunity in Catherine's outreach to expand our knowledge of what is possible in wellness and the journey of tools that we can use to get there. Thank you for joining us for this conversation today. You are listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell. This is episode 6. It's natural to find the way to wellness. Hi, Catherine, and welcome.
Hello, and thank you.
As we begin each episode with a cup of tea for our chat, have you got a tea there in a mug that you've selected for today?
I do, actually. I've been drinking this nonstop for the last week, and it's called a clarity tea. And that's great for me. I need all the clarity I can get. But it's mostly a blueberry and ginseng composition. And it's, I actually think I got it from a friend who was experimenting with putting different kinds of flavors together. And so she made this one up for me in particular, and I love it. It's absolutely delicious.
Sounds great. And what kind of mug did you put it in?
Well, today I'm featuring my pink thermal mug here, and it'll keep your tea, I think, hot for the next 72 hours.
I wouldn't know what that is because mine's always cold by the time I remember to drink it.
Oh, that's my problem. I know.
Oh, well, I was thinking about our conversation and I was reminded about a lovely woman, Kim Becker, who used to volunteer for me at my fitness and dance studio. And oh, she was beautiful. She did so many wonderful things for me to help the business along as I was a young mom with 2 little kids and my husband was working in the city. So I'm holding up this China teacup set, which has green and it's got gold leaves all through it. And when I moved away, she gave me this cup and she said, she said, this cup always reminded me of you when I sat down to drink, so I'm passing it on. And so that's what I filled it up with today was that cup. And I put into it, to be honest. So I was thinking about what tea blend might work the best for our conversation today. And this one comes from our tea company. And it's one that's just really mellow and soft. And it works with calming, same kind of, yours is clarity, mine's towards calming. And I just believe that when we're honest with ourselves and support others with compassion and love, we can transform things naturally and holistically. And that just seemed like the right fit for today. So that gets us back to you, Catherine. So I'm going to open it up for you to tell us a little bit about your voyage as a journalist and your passion for being an ambassador for wellness tools. So can you share with the listeners?
Well, basically, journalism came to me because I have always enjoyed writing. Ever since I was 5 years old, my mother has a little book that I stapled together out of random pieces of paper, and I'd written a book about relationships, apparently. Anyway, so I've always wanted to be a writer. So I went into journalism and took broadcasting. And of course, I started out, as every journalist does, in mainstream media. And That very enjoyable, very enjoyable. You really get to see the world from that perspective. And I think I enjoyed that. And then about 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, maybe, I had sort of, I guess it's an awakening of some sort. It was a sort of a spontaneous experience where I just sort of had a clarity about life and myself and very specific aspects of my own life. And I guess some people call it a spiritual awakening, but I don't try to put too much of a category on it. I just know that I just knew things. I knew things about myself. I knew things about other people. There was all of this information that was potentially valuable to others as guidance. And so I started getting into intuitive therapy, and I started meeting with people. They would come to me and they would ask questions about, why is my life like this the way it is now? And what does it mean that this keeps happening to me? And I just had this information that seemed to be helpful. So I did that for a number of years, actually. And then I thought, I enjoyed the therapeutic aspect of this, but I thought, what I really want to do is write about it. I want to talk to people who understand how people work and the mentality of it and the energy behind it. And I just got so excited about it that I thought, this is definitely what I should be doing. So that's sort of how that came about. I started specializing in the holistic approach to health and wellness. And also working at a hospital, I was able to take very specialized courses in pathology and pathophysiology so that I could understand the clinical side as well as the energetic side or the spiritual side. And it was just, I don't know, it's made me so excited about life. And I just have to say that if it weren't for having discovered that part of myself, I don't know that I would be quite as enthusiastic as I am right now. I don't think that my life would have been so fulfilling, to be honest. So I think that awakening, whatever you want to call it, saved me in many ways. And so it's become sort of, I'm always trying to hear what my subconscious is trying to tell me. And I like to go about trying to find modalities to help other people do the same if that's what they're interested in.
Wow, that's really interesting. I was just thinking back when you just said about being 5 and writing about relationships and thinking, what would you know at 5 that you would want to share, just such an interesting thought. Because, we write stories and we draw those pictures, but not always thinking about what are the relationships out of that. And then where that takes you, was there other things that you kind of did as you came through junior high and high school that was kind of leading you in the same way?
I would say yes. Well, I've always written everything. I've always had a journal. I've always written. I'm the one that would have like a napkin full of really tiny print that would at the restaurant table, and it would be full of this stuff, and it would be just random, and I'd probably just leave it behind, so anyone cleaning off the table afterwards would be, what is wrong with this person? Or I'd keep them as scraps of paper. But in junior high, high school, I would say that people would just come to me and ask me questions about things, like, what do you think of this? And these weren't even people I was especially close to, but I don't know what it is. Some people, they just come up to you. They want to talk and they feel like you're the person they should talk to. So I would say that it's always been one of those things. It's like, you are who you are, whether you know it or not. And it's always nice if at some point you can figure it out because everybody else has.
And sometimes it's seen so clearly from the other side, at high school reunion a couple of years back, they were talking about some of the things that I used to do in high school. And I had no memory of the things they were talking about, but very similar to what you're saying, because I was the one that they'd all come to for relationship advice, how to solve a homework problem or whatever. And I didn't realize I had forgotten how much time I had spent doing that. And so it was interesting to see myself through their eyes of what they remembered and how it was. Yeah.
It's true, because when it comes naturally to you, you sort of forget all the things that you've done and said because it's second nature to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you went into journalism school and you dove into some of the, like you said, mainstream kinds of things. How are you kind of steered in the direction of the holistic, finding the little niches and the pieces that moved you over, I guess, into this work?
Well, when I was working mainstream news, I was working for a radio station, and I had the opportunity to meet Elizabeth May. And this was sort of at the height of when she was very, boots on the ground kind of thing. And she was actually having a demonstration or giving a talk, I think, on the Canso Causeway. And so I was sent down to interview her. And I remember because I had to sort of chase her because she was in a big hurry and she was running around trying to get everything organized. And so she said, "Sure, I'll talk to you, but you got to keep up with me." So I thought, okay. And she's like a little force of nature. So I was chasing her with my microphone, and I was asking her, kind of what she intended to speak to the people about, and sort of a little bit of her background. And I became very aware that this woman was not just a force of nature, but she was a lot of the things that I felt I identified with, but for some reason had never really connected to. So she was sort of a catalyst for me in that moment. It was her intelligence, it was her passion about nature, and it dawned on me just what a connection we have with our environment and how environmentalism is just so much more than a science or a field of study. It's actually who we are. And I think that was probably the moment that I realized that there was something here that I really wanted to know more about and I wanted to look into. So even though at the time it was only sort of a glimmer of an awareness, in retrospect, I would say when I look back on that, that was a pivotal moment for me to look into how I wanted to pursue environmental relationships and how we deal with each other, how we deal with our environment, and how we deal with sort of our inner voice as well.
Well, that's quite a connection.
It is.
I have a friend who spends every day at least 1 hour outside. And for her, talking to the trees, being amongst the trees, going for a walk along the beach, that is the way that she connects with herself. She connects with nature, but she connects with herself. And I think so many of us, particularly with all of the restrictions and being at home, I am for one, who hardly gets outside because I'm happy inside. And so I don't really feel the need to go out. But every time I do, I notice the transition and the difference. As soon as those feet hit the ground, the wind's on your face, the sun, the rain, it's just so beautiful. So is there, as you wove from Elizabeth May, was there something else that grabbed at you? Was there trees or?
Let me see. Well, actually, I grew up in an off-the-grid home, and this was long before it was trendy. I know that's the movement everyone moves towards now, but it was, let me see, I think my parents built that home, I don't know, 50 years ago, and completely off-grid. They used solar panels and generators and that sort of thing. So I was literally born in the forest. Basically, I was raised in the forest. So it's almost like, people have a screened in gazebo. That's sort of what my home was. In fact, the house was actually built from the logs that they tore down to make a clearing to build the house. So it couldn't get much more intrinsic than that. My middle name is Skye. It's just, how much more on the road do you need to be? How many more signs do you need to see that this is your calling, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I always felt like there was a reason for that. And I get it now. But again, as you ask, like, what sort of moved you on the path? Well, going home after you've left home, and then you come back home and you look around you and you go, oh, I've missed this. And I understand that this was healing for me. And I didn't know it at the time until I went away. And then I came back and I thought, this is just something I need to look into further. And I've got the tools literally in my cells. Like I've literally got it within me. My connection is there. So I would say that was another movement towards holistic journalism as well.
Beautiful. Are there some stories that have jumped out at you with the different interviews that you've done, and the kinds of people that maybe had a similar experience?
I was actually surprised at how many people that I've interviewed have told a story that I recognize personally. And I figure once again, it's some sort of universal connection, bringing me the people I need to speak with for this greater understanding I'm always looking for. I interviewed a contemporary shaman in Australia. Her name is Odette Night Sky, and she was pivotal as well. She talked about sort of a similar spontaneous experience where she was just knew what she should do. She was having, troubles dealing with her own mental state, and a lot of information. And then all of a sudden it was like this crack of lightning. And then she just knew what she should do with it. So she started to study contemporary shamanism. And speaking with her, she's someone I think everybody should talk to for at least an hour, just as part of their daily routine, because she's so insightful. She sees you, and she sees what is behind what you're saying. And if you talk to her about any of your experiences, she can assess you. She was an amazing experience in herself. There was also a man in Guatemala. He spends half of his time in Boulder, Colorado, and then the next 6 months of the year in Guatemala. And he built a little log cabin in the forest, which again was familiar to me. And he is connected with the Heart Math Institute. So what they do is there's all of the studies, of course, with the coherence between the heart and the mind, and how that energetic frequency has a lot to do with our health and how fulfilled we feel with life. So I was able to interview him as well. And Eric was amazing, Eric Knaus. And again, another story that was very similar, because he also, after he was building his cottage, had a bit of an awakening, and he attributed it to the physiological stress and the psychological stress of building his home and the isolation. It doesn't seem to matter what brings you to this point. If you need it, you'll have it. And everyone seems to have a different story about how it presents itself to them. And there was in Scotland, his name is Graham Gardner, and he's a dowser and a geomancer, and he was amazing. His podcast is Adventures in Dowsing, and it's a fantastic podcast. And he talks about, first of all, dowsing. So he uses the rods, and he assesses people's lands to help them, improve their stream connection, their gardens, where they should put their garden, where they shouldn't. If there's any sort of energetic disturbance or distress. He talks about our relationship to the Wi-Fi that's all around us as well. He's an amazing person to talk to. And he is quite sensitive to electromagnetic activity. And I thought, oh, that's just somebody else that's got the same story that I do. And it's just amazing that everyone I've interviewed, they're so insightful. They're so good at what they do. They're passionate about what they do. And they always have something. I come away with it just being that much richer for having had that experience.
I'm thinking about, just when I'm tired, I'm working on something, and, you're working away at the work stuff. And then I get the conversation like we're having now with people, and just that conversation starts up, and it's this spark that happens, and it's a vibrancy, and time doesn't exist anymore. It's just you're just lost in the conversation, but you're also uplifted so incredibly by the conversation. And it's different than, when I ran a dance studio, that I love what I do with dance, but that was work. It just had a different feel to it. Than even if you do even just a movement pattern that's more of a somatic healing kind of thing, where you're bringing in the energy flow and you're working with the energy. It's just such a different feel. So it's wonderful. You sense that as you go to do your interviews and conversations.
It is, and you find that you're just you're I don't know, a better person for having done it. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know if it brings out something in you that was already there, or it inspires you. Maybe that's what it is. I just think that as a society, we should just be more aware of how inspiring we can be to each other.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So I know you've done lots of interviews in Nova Scotia. You were talking about people from around the world you've interviewed. Is there anybody in Nova Scotia that's really jumped out?
Well, I interviewed Sean Leonard. He's a medium, and he has a show called Spirit Talker on the Aboriginal People's Television Network. And he is based in Nova Scotia. And I thought that was a lovely interview, because, of course, he is helping using mediumship as a therapy. So he's connecting people with loved ones, and with information that would be valuable to them at the time. And I thought that was, I've always thought that mediumship was, I guess, a sort of, in mainstream media, it's sort of seen as a form of entertainment, which is fine. But I always thought, oh, what a shame that they're not really using that in a way that could be pivotal for people. Like, that has so much potential as a therapy. If people could look beyond, it as sort of being a party gimmick, it's so much more than that. And so that I love being able to interview mediums, people who channel, because I just think that what they can do has such a purpose and such a power for people that I like to put it in a very different light, if at all possible, so that people can see something else. And someone else, I believe she's located in Dartmouth. Her name is Wanda Amos, and she does quantum healing hypnosis therapy. She has changed my life. She was so lovely. I interviewed her for a couple of different articles for Advocate Media, and neuroplasticity was one, and the power of the words we use and how we talk to ourselves, but also on hypnosis therapy. And she was so kind to do a session with me, and we recorded it. And I was able to do a series for Nature Therapy and Beyond on my own hypnosis experience. And I had this opportunity to communicate with myself on a level that, it's almost like a dream state. So it was like kind of like a past life. There was a future life. There was insight into my current life. And then there was this dialogue with the subconscious mind, which was amazing, because there was this energy to the subconscious mind that, I'd always been hearing, but I never really got to shake hands with it before, and when it's right there sitting on your head, just it was scary at first, but you kind of have to just be brave for just long enough to get over it, and then allow it to come through. And the information was just pivotal, talking about, to be yourself, to let things come through you, to understand that things are never how they seem. There's always a perspective. There's always kind of like a filter you put on everything, and you never really see how it is. That was so valuable to me that I don't think I'd ever really look at life the same way, after I've had an experience like that. And that's what I mean. These kinds of therapies, I think people just need to understand the potential, and there are truly gifted practitioners out there. And the work that you do for your students, what you're doing is helping to give them back their bodies, give them back their minds. I know we had talked a little bit about some of the people you'd worked with, people who were in a bed and couldn't move, but they were still able to do the Tai Chi exercises, and they were still able to benefit physically from that. Personally, I have a lot of problems with pain in my feet, and I do a lot of Tai Chi for that reason as well. And I find that, we wake up in the morning and your feet, oh, it's just agonizing. And then you have to do a few Tai Chi movements to get the energy circulating again. And then after a while, you feel all right. But that first thing in the morning it's brutal. And I think you do, is it Touch for Health? Touch for Health, yes. Yep. Yeah. And that sort of thing, that is doing something for people that, it's just, you wouldn't necessarily come to it on your own. Some people do, but some people really need to go to a practitioner to get help with this sort of thing. And that's the sort of thing that, I don't know, it's just revolutionary for me. And I just love to share that with people. But there are quite a few in Nova Scotia, actually, that I've interviewed that have really been, really opened my eyes, I would say. When we first moved here, it'd be 11 years ago in June. And my thought when we moved, coming from Alberta, where there were lots of instructors of different techniques and things, and I thought, I'm moving to rural Cape Breton. I won't find anybody. How will I continue my studies? And then I arrived here, and I think we were here a week, and there was a little poster up in like the post office about learn about the psoas muscle with this yoga person. And she was traveling through from California going to Germany, but she was making a stop in rural Cape Breton. And for $10, I spent 4 hours learning about one muscle. And when I went to the place, it was in a barn up in a loft, again, in the middle of nowhere. And I came home and I said to my husband, I can't believe that was the most amazing experience for an afternoon to just sit with one muscle and find out what it was about. And I never imagined it would be while I had arrived in Cape Breton. And the gifts that have continued to come since that time, I don't think I would have had that in the big city center where, more things are accessible, we think in our minds. But actually, so many people come through Nova Scotia, come through Cape Breton. They come to visit, but they always leave more than I think they take away. It's just such a beautiful experience. And so I feel very privileged for some of the holistic and wellness opportunities that this province has provided. So it's interesting you find the same. It's true. And I was a lot like you. I thought, how am I going to do this in rural Nova Scotia? And I thought, well, I know I'll start out by looking anywhere else for people to interview. And that was extremely rewarding. But then I thought I started to, branch out a bit and meet more of the people in Nova Scotia and connect with them. And I thought, oh, there's just as much wealth of knowledge here as anywhere else. I don't need to travel far. That was just a preconceived notion I had in my head. Yeah, exactly. I'd say the same. And then now that we have Zoom, we have the ability to connect around the world. That's interesting in itself of how much connection happens. But still, I find there are still so many tools just down my block, and it might not be the way I was thinking I was going to find the information. Sometimes it's just a conversation over tea, which is, kind of how I try to set up the podcast, but it's sometimes visiting the neighbor and standing just in their space or the animals that they have around them. And it just transforms things in a way, I guess you can't always do in the city or in places where a lot of traffic is going through all the time. It's just too busy for that. So. Yeah, that's true. I do like the pace. I like the connection to nature is one of them. You don't get that in the city. Exactly.
So you and I were talking before about how to bring a movement idea in, because I always try to bring in dance and a little bit of the joy that comes from being able to just dance freely. And you expressed the snake movement that you learned. So I would love to share that with the listeners. And if they're driving while they're listening, they'll have to wait till they get home and out of the car. But if for anybody that's listening just in their living room, we hope that they'll join in. Would you like to share it?
Sure. You wanted me to describe it?
We can both do it together. No one can see us. They can hear us and we can giggle a lot.
That's true. It's actually, let me see if I can get this right. It's called the swimming dragon. And the idea is that it draws the energy up from the earth and down from the heavens. But you do start out basically putting your palms together in a prayer fashion and standing with your legs slightly apart. And then you swim with the points of your fingers like a snake. So I see why you call it the snake. And you go back and forth and you loop and you go up and down and to the side. And you can wiggle if you want to, but I hear all the snapping and the cracking. So sometimes I don't always want to do the wiggle. And then what you do is you can go up and point your hands on top of your head and stand on your tiptoes. And then you come down to chest level. And then you make a slicing motion, kind of like your arms turn to the side and become a warrior saber. And you go to the left, and then you come back to the right, and then the left again, and then up over your head, and then down. And then you sort of have your prayer fashion at your belly area after that. And then you just sort of do your surrender hands and release. And like I said before, there are times in the grocery store where if I could pull that out, oh, that would be great.
I had a recollection of doing that at one time. So I wonder if I was exposed to that. It's very similar to what we do in Sabre. And the changing over of the hands. I mean, obviously the palms are together as they slice across. But when you do that, it completely changes the pelvis. And so it actually creates almost a figure eight swimming action in the pelvis, which is really cool because I hadn't thought about putting the hands together to do that. So.
Oh, that's really valuable. I actually had, a surgery done 4 months ago, and I actually need to do pelvic exercises. And I hadn't realized that particular movement was so good for that.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned. Oh, thank you. That is so good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the pieces in with Tai Chi is when your palms are down, pelvis sits one way. And then when you rotate the hands and put the palms up, if you relax through the spine and into the pelvis, they'll shift. And you can, some actions that you do when you're dancing, you might have one up, one down, one palm up, one palm down, and then you might trade it over. And that actually will shift inside that little bit of movement. And for some people, that's just enough to open it where it has been locked. And it's very gentle. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Now I understand why I'm so drawn to that move.
Oh, yeah. This is lovely. Lovely. Is there anything else you want to share before we finish for today?
Well, just to say thank you for having me on your show. I love talking about natural therapies. I love speaking with you. You're a fantastic interview. You're just like an encyclopedia.
Thank you.
So I love that. But yeah, just thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been a real joy. Thank you.
Oh, well, it's great. And I was so happy when you reached out the other day. I know you were reaching out on behalf of the podcast we had done together, and it just sparked something. And it was like, oh, there's just so much more that's possible for us in communicating and having more conversations. So I'm really glad that you were able to join me on my podcast this time. So thank you.
Oh, yes, my pleasure. We'll have to do it again sometime.
So you've been listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, and I invite you to explore some special ways to build your self-care toolbox. You can find Catherine at naturaltherapiesandcounseling.wordpress.com, and you can look up her podcasts on Spotify. And as well, you can go to anchor.fm, Nature Therapy and Beyond. There are workshops, webinars, and classes that you can find on canbewell.org, which is an organization that I've spent a great deal of time and energy with because I love what they're doing for holistic and wellness initiatives. You can find my YouTube channel, Michelle Greenwell, and there are many playlists there that can provide you with valuable tools to grow and learn with. And thank you so much for joining in the conversation, having a cup of tea, and being a part of Be Well with Michelle Greenwell. Have a great day.